Okay, interactions in ecological communities. Let's take a look at this section now. Competition, predation, symbiosis. So describe the basis of interactions and symbiotic relationships and describe influences of these interactions on population changes. We'd have to look at predator-prey, symbiosis, and inter-specific competition. So competition, when we say intra, and for example, sometimes intrapersonal skills. What that means is skills like how you're feeling about yourself, is not interacting with other people, but the skills or intrapersonal nature of, how you feel and things like that. Okay, so this is competition between the same species. Okay, intra within the same species. So for example, and these are density dependent resources, and one of those would be mates. So these peacocks, this male peacock strutting its stuff, it would be in competition for a mate. Okay. Now this is quite interesting here. These are each going to be seeds. They're going to be in competition for each other. So to reduce the competition, seedlings can disperse. Okay, and offspring from different parents. Okay, ways of offspring different from the parents rather. Okay, through sexual selection, reproduction, variation is going to actually reduce intraspecies competition because you're going to be slightly different than your parents. You can exploit different niches, which we'll look at a bit later on. Okay, interspecies competition is between different species for same resources. And this is where we introduce this concept of the word niche. That's the role an organism has in its environment. Okay. We want to talk a bit about introduced species here and the concept of specialization to reduce competition. Okay, so interspecies competition is in this Venn diagram, species B, species C, it's right in the overlap area. They overlap, and therefore there's an overlap of niches. Now we're going to talk a bit about this warbler case study. It's very interesting in a moment. Gauss's principle, if two populations have the same niche, one will be eliminated. We've got two types of paramecia. P. aurelia is red and P. caudatum is blue. They are grown on different mediums. If you remember, paramecium are those single-celled organisms, jack of all trades. Um, yeah, you found in pond water. They kind of look like that. Contractile vacuole, whatever. Okay, so this is in separate containers, no problem. But look at what happens if we mix them together. Aurelia has outcompeted caudatum. It was better at getting the food, or maybe it was more aggressive. So if two populations have the same niche, one will be eliminated. Well, this leads to specialization. Take a look at these warblers. Here's a spruce tree. Think of it as a condo complex. The bay-breasted say, okay, I'm going to take this part of the real estate. The Cape May warbler said, I'm going to feed up here. I'll take the top floors. And the rump warbler, yellow rump warbler, specializes down here. Okay, that's now they're all specialized. They actually, therefore, can they're not going to outcompete each other, and they are able to occupy the same habitat, even though they've got different niches. Predator-prey, predator-consumer interactions. Non-competitive interspecies competition interaction. There's not a competition here, folks. One animal gets eaten. Okay. Now this leads to a lot of what we call coevolution, and these predator-prey graphs follow this kind of sinusoidal cyclical nature, and we're going to look at that in a moment. With the most commonly famous studied one is lynx, snowshoe hare. Lynx, 90% of its diet are snowshoe hares. Now look at this graph here. From 1845, who was counting lynx back in 1845? It was the Hudson's Bay Company. And what they then did is they just extrapolated the green line, the hairs. Notice that the hair relative to the lynx is R selected, so its biotic potential is going to be higher than the lynx, which would be more K selected. Also notice what happens here. When the population, well, let's get to this part right here. The lynx population, because its biotic potential is a bit lower, it follows a few years after the R-selected population. So it's always a bit of a lag. The hares peak, and then a few years later, the lynx peak. So that's something we can get out of this graph. We can also see that the populations significantly fluctuate in response to each other. After the hares peak, density-dependent factors cause them to get stressed, and they have hardly any what's called leverets, baby hares, and they plummet. A few years later, the lynx population follows. Okay, they will travel 400 or 500 kilometers in search of food. When the hares just crash, okay, now this is very interesting. When the hares crash, they actually cause the lynx population to be in check. So who's killing who? Well, in this picture, tag you're it, the lynx is winning, okay? But when the hares say, look, we're gonna control the lynx population by just crashing. And when we crash, so do the so do the hares, if the lynx a few years later, and then the cycle all continues on again. Okay, coevolution. This is Wood Buffalo National Park, place I used to work at. These are the largest wolves in the world because they eat the largest land mammal in North America, a wood bison. So they've co-evolved. The reason why they're so big is they've got to be so big to eat the wolves, the bison. And it's a fascinating dynamic that occurs on the Peace Athabasca Delta. If you ever get a chance to go to Northern Alberta and go there, it is well worth a trip. Very difficult to get into though. Okay, I want you to watch this video again of coevolution. It is worth the time to watch it. It's absolutely fascinating. And we'll leave that here.